like it. Susan Loftus, you bring a party. We got a great panel. And it's a beautiful night. Talk about sustainability. My name is Michael Dempsey. I do have the privilege and pleasure and joy of being the Dean and Director of Lenoir Rhyne University's Asheville campus, and that's where you are today. Thank you thank you so much. A little bit about us. We were founded in 1891 in Hickory. We've been here 10 years. Changing lives, graduate studies. We have 10 graduate programs that run out of this building. We also have the Lenoir Rhyne Equity and Diversity Institute. So look that up. It's a training program for companies, unions, and the playing field for everybody. Part of that, a big part of what we do, is linked to, you guessed it, sustainability. Gosh, I think this is a perfect place for this. I want to turn it over to my colleague here. I would like to thank Councilperson Maggie Ullman for being here. Stalwart supporter of sustainability. And we've had you here. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is someone in here on Zoom on a laptop by chance?
So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Keith McDade, of our sustainability study.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. My name is Keith McDade. I run the Sustainability Studies program here, although I'm on sabbatical right now, so I've been hiding until tonight. And I'm very excited about tonight because the right people showed up. And Susan and Susan have organized a wonderful event for us. They are daring to ask really courageous questions about what's at the center of sustainability and how do we resolve some conflict as we move towards a more sustainable future. We're living in actually, I want to also point out, Council Member Maggie Ullman, 11 years ago, when we were starting the program, she was one of our very first speakers here. And she's been speaking in classes all along, up until now, really pushing our students to challenge themselves to think about what's in the budget and how we're going to get these things done. What about all these competing interests? As recently as last year, she talked about sustainability past, present, and future. And so we're really lucky to have Maggie really kind of laying out the groundwork for us here and really setting a great example and leading us. We're in a fragile moment in history. We all know that. That's why you're here. It's a very scary time. It's really, it feels like things are falling apart everywhere. And the climate, we know we just heard 2.5 weeks ago, the final warning, after decades of warning, the final warning, the IPCC said, it is going to be too late if we wait any longer to do something about this. And now already that seems like old news because it's being drowned out by status quo and drive towards more status quo and all the other issues that we need to pay attention to. And all the other issues are important. And so it becomes really complicated because we have issues that are here and now. And yet when we think with the systems perspective, we recognize if we only look at any one part of the system, then other parts of the system have unintended consequences. So we need to bring people together to figure out how the system works so that we're in the right direction. Students from one of my, well, from a class that I'm not teaching, but Professor Sharon Hayes is teaching this semester in environmental policy, started their class this semester with this question of, how do you take an orange and divide it for 3 people who all want that orange? And you don't simply divide it into 3 equal parts, do you? You instead engage people in a conversation about what are the underlying interests behind their position of, I want that orange. And so that has some parallels to how things will play out tonight. There's a lot of different interests that are underneath various positions that are being represented. I think that's really important. I'll say the students in our program are amazing. And so many of people here are friends and supporters of the program, and we appreciate that. Students take classes in policy and economics and business, decision-making, human behavior, communication, leadership, and many other areas to better themselves, to start to transform the world, to transform the organizations, to transform institutions, and transform society. They are essentially looking to create a world where everyone, including all living beings, has the ability to flourish on Earth for as long as possible. And they're trying to create the kinds of conditions where we can collectively manage ourselves in a better way. And so we can collectively manage ourselves so that we're resilient, regenerative, and we can repair the systems that we've been breaking. And so through their coursework and much of their applied work, they're out doing amazing things. We have alumni in the room, we have students in the room, we have students in Zoomland. Welcome, all of you. Before I turn things over to Susan, I should let you know, if you didn't know already, there are bathrooms right on either side of the elevator, and there's a solo bathroom right behind me. There's also an emergency exit right here. Close the door. An emergency exit which takes you out to Montford Ave, and there, as you know, there's a beautiful view out that way if you need to get out. We don't expect anything to happen, but we need to have the basic information related to emergencies because we're in an emergency and we have a lot of work to do. So I thank you all for coming out. I know that you're paying attention. I know that you feel that the world is perhaps at a great unraveling, but we can make it the great turning that Dr. Joanna Macy has talked about. We can turn toward the better world, and we can do that by engaging the various ideas and disciplines of all the people on this panel and in the room. So thank you, Susan.
It's on vacation. That's how dedicated he is.
Yes.
I'm going to read these introductions so that I can make them go very quickly. So thank you all for being here. I'm starting at the far end. Steve Hendricks, bachelor's in architecture, a master's in
Why does it say recording, Jack? I don't want it to record.
They record I'm not sure if Zoomland people can see me, but somebody needs to turn off their microphone.
I'm
Either
done.
students in Hickory need to
No
turn
way.
off their microphone. Back to Steve. Steve, with his 33 years with the National Park Service and the U.S. Forest Service, focused on the management of rivers, wilderness areas, and the design of site-sensitive facilities. He's co-authored several design and planning guides for public lands. Steve is the recipient of the Aldo Leopold National Conservation Stewardship Award. He chaired the 2012 North American Rivers Symposium. He's the past chair of the Asheville Urban Forestry Commission and now serves on the leadership team of Western North Carolina Sierra Club chapter. Thank you. John Howard is an urban planner from Charlotte with over 20 years experience in various planning disciplines. John expanded and managed the Historic Resources Commission for the City of Charlotte and developed the Historic District Guidelines. He has focused much of his preservation work on historic African-American communities in Charlotte. John continues to educate the public and advocate in the field of preservation planning, while currently focusing on development planning and transportation nodes and corridors. John is a part-time adjunct professor at UNC Charlotte, where he received his bachelor in architecture. Thank you for driving up the hill to be with us. Many professional awards include the National Association of State Foresters Urban Forestry Lifetime Achievement Award. Ed has been recognized nationally as an urban forest ecology leader for almost 40 years, both in the private and public sector. Asheville Greenworks is fortunate to have Ed as its chairman of the board. His current work focuses on maximizing the services of natural systems in urban and urbanizing environments while managing risk. His MS degree is in urban forest ecology, State University of New York, and he also studied forestry at Syracuse University, as well as his primary initial degree in environmental horticulture and arboriculture from UCal Davis. Thank you. Now, to Dave Hollister, our Sundance proprietor, is a technological expert responsible for large solar commercial installations. In addition to keeping abreast of the latest technological advancements related to net metering, Dave is also very involved in state policy or in the state policy arena and is constantly advocating on many different levels, on behalf of the solar consumer. Thank you, Dave. Randy Wine joined Greenfield Alliance in spring of 2022. Previously, he managed an education and outreach program for energy efficiency and building science across Louisiana. Before that, in Seattle, California, and Boston, he developed nonprofit programs for students, traffic engineers, ocean advocates, community organizers, adults, families, and youth. Jamie studied marine biology and environmental studies at UCal Santa Cruz and holds professional certifications in building performance, leadership development, and real estate. Jamie's the manager of our Blue Horizons. Dr. Allison Ormsby serves as Director of Sustainability for UNCA. She has been teaching environmental studies at UNCA Asheville since 2015. Elsewhere, she has taught and worked on campus sustainability initiatives ranging from habitat conservation to recycling, campus gardens, and general conservation measures. Her research interests include global sustainability, environmental education, eco-villages, park management, and sacred forests. She's also served on several boards and on the City of Asheville's Sustainability Advisory Committee on Energy and the Environment. We all know our facilitator, the Honorable Maggie Allman. The Environment and Safety Committee and the liaison to both the Historic Resources Commission and the Sustainability Advisory Committee. Maggie is also our former Asheville Sustainability Director. And Maggie, before I turn it over to you, I just wanted to acknowledge a last minute addition to our group. Alden Hathaway is from Atlanta. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And he just drove up every evening. Thank you so much. He's been in the sustainable energy arena for 40 years. And his family, his father, and he started African Lights in 1997. They've installed over 2,800 facilities and continue to install solar powered micro and nano electric grids in sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you so much.
So before we get into where all the different the panelists are going to be speaking, I just wanted to start with a little dose of reality. The reality is that, as Keith really inspirationally, you would like me to stand in the middle. I can do that. As Keith was saying, these are not easy times in our community, in our world, yet we have to dig deep and find hope. And for me, being in this community does that. I spent nearly 20 years working on climate change work in Asheville. The last 10 years I've spent working at a national and international level, again, on climate change, to build coalitions, to get people to row in the same direction. And if I've learned one thing, it is that competition distracts and steals our energy. And when we're focused on my specific, narrowly focused idea of an outcome, above all, it kills our energy to really unlock the creative solutions we need to get to both and thinking. If we could solve this, we would have, whether it's things that we're dealing with here in Asheville that aren't about sustainability or sustainability stuff. We need to get to the next level of regenerative thinking, where we're starting to think about things in a way we haven't before. And when this group got together, we spent some time, there might have been some wine, we might have gotten passionate. And I think each of us, as we look especially about applying the things we care about, historic preservation, urban tree canopy, renewable energy, and we look at, we take it from the conceptual land to the actual on the ground, to where does it hit when we're getting permitting at the local level. We do sometimes have conflicts. And when we dig in our heels at that conflict place, it steals our energy and it distracts us from really unlocking the yes and. So where can we go forward? Where is the creativity? So we had a little bit of those toughs, and then we got to this place of like, we're actually on the same team. We really want to do this. And so we thought and talked and had a little more wine and then thought about what are our goals? And I wrote them down because they were so crisp when we came up with them. So the purpose of what we're doing here today is first and foremost, that we want to build bridges across the community. It's not an event that I go to every day where we have a renewable energy leader, an urban tree leader, and a historic preservation leader in the room at the same time. That's special. The Susans have created something really magic. We want to create those bridges. The second goal today is that we need to build hope in these possibilities. I'm tired of being worried, and it doesn't do us any good. So we need to find the hope. And for us, I think collectively listening, sharing helps us do that. And then the third goal is to really practice building the both and muscle. It's not built in all of us all the time. And our society and our culture and our economy really makes it hard to think both and. It's either or most of the time. And so we need to practice that muscle, practice that in our heart, practice that in our head, practice that in conversation and community. So if any of us feel some of that static buzz of either or, let's will both and into the conversation as we're talking, as we're sharing, once we get into discussions, when you're asking questions, let's bring that both and thinking in, because that's the only way we're going to move forward. So I think you're going to kick this off, right? All right, we already had introduction. So the way we'll do this is we're going to do 5 minutes with each speaker. And I will help remind us if we're getting close on time, and then we'll get to have an interactive discussion.
And we click our own slides and then hand it. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm hoping this clicker.
You gotta get
for
on
me.
the front,
Huh?
too. Like everyone.
And love.
Okay, I'm gonna stand here so I can speak.
Okay.
I won't block the screen. As Maggie said, there are many aspects to sustainability and climate resilience. One of the things I want to talk about that is getting a lot more attention and a lot of good science has come out is green infrastructure. And here's the generally used definition. And it's kind of a mouthful, but I'll read it to you. Strategically planned and managed network of natural lands, working landscapes, and other open spaces that conserves ecosystem values and functions and provides associated benefits to human populations. A mouthful, but what it means is connecting ecosystems and getting most value out of ecosystem linkages. This idea goes back, way back in the last centuries, 19th century Olmsted, McCard, E.O. Wilson, Richard Foreman, famous landscape ecologist, have advanced this science. So where now things that were supposed back 100 years ago are now accepted as part of science, how ecosystems work and function. What are some examples of green infrastructure? Greenways, urban forest tree canopy. Urban forest tree canopy here is kind of the glue that holds it all together. Ecological communities with natural or restored features, steep slopes, sensitive areas, parks, streams and river corridors, wetlands, floodplains, working landscapes with ecological values such as forests and farms, all part of that network. Networking being the operative word. There's an important subset of green infrastructure that some of you have probably heard a lot about, used a lot, which is hydrological functions. That's a subset of green infrastructure. In other words, abating stormwater, how you deal with flooding, how you deal with a lot of riparian issues. It's going to become more and more critical as we get into more and more climate change. Key question here is, how do we balance growth and ecological values? That's what everybody needs to know the answer to. And the challenge is to making all these things we're talking about today work together and get a flow out of it. So that we're not, as Maggie said, we're not butting heads all the time, that we're trying to work towards some kind of common vision. green infrastructure has a lot of benefits. 3 biggies here: climate resilience, biodiversity, energy conservation. We know that we can lower ambient temperatures quite a bit with shade, tree cover, transpiration of trees, provide a cooling effect in forests, the same in urban areas. So we have to balance all these things out. You get much as a 20-degree difference from shade to hot paved surface. Biodiversity, we're having a crash in biodiversity worldwide. Major problem. If any of you have read any of the Elizabeth Colbert books about the sixth extinction, especially talks about the crash in biodiversity. We have a lot of green assets in Asheville. But we've also lost a lot. We just need to be aware of that. We're not that unusual for a city that has growth pains. We've lost, we know between 2008 and 2018, we lost an area the size of Central Park as far as tree cover, a lot of that being paved over. So that's a loss in capacity to be able to use our green infrastructure to benefit. So what we need to think about is, do we replace that? How do we deal with that in the future? We need to be aware. That's just what we know about that 10-year period that we measured accurately. Probably a good bit more than that over 20 years.
And Montford itself was 10 to 15% loss, this neighborhood.
So this is more than Buncombe County actually, but this is the county was using green infrastructure as a organizing tool in their planning process, which makes a lot of sense because they're looking at conserving the $30 million bonds that went in. They're looking at using that for conservation, greenways, and other applications. So in sensitive areas. So we're looking at green infrastructure kind of as a prioritization kind of process. This includes actually more than Buncombe County, but we've got a great green network around us. We've got national forests, national parks, we've got all kind of things, but we don't have it always linking into the city and the urban areas where it really does the work for us, if we can have it there. Okay, I'm gonna move on pretty quickly. We were asked to talk about 3 things about what we can do locally, what all of us can do locally. Number 1, I think, is be a good steward of whatever land you're dealing with. Be aware, biodiversity is key. Use native plants if you can. In urban areas, like as we get more density, we'll get more and more density, regardless. How do we offset some of that density? I think probably we need to think about offsetting it with green space in some cases where appropriate. An equitable distribution of green space. And statewide, we need to think about these linkages also. It's critical along our rivers, along our sensitive areas throughout the state. We're doing a little better in the coast, in the mountains. Maybe not so great in the middle of the state in some cases. There's a green infrastructure guide that's already written for North Carolina. You can find it online at the Green Infrastructure Center. It's connected to the University of Virginia. It's a little dated, but it's got some really good information and case studies in it. Conservation Fund is very active in green infrastructure, and you need to be aware of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is a very important program nationally. So That's enough, yeah.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah.
John, on to you.
Thanks, Stephen. That was a good intro. You covered a lot of what I was going to talk about, so thank you. I won't speak just from a Charlotte perspective because, of course, we're not, Asheville's not Charlotte. So I'll be kind of more general in what I'm going to talk about and some of my experiences. I think one of the hardest jobs I had as a planner for 20 plus years, was taking over the HDC, Historic District Commission, because of the changes that were taking place and how things are being interpreted. Application of guidelines or misapplication of guidelines, and more stuff like permitting and what's getting built and all that kind of stuff. But also there was a change in demographics. So we had newer folks coming in, buying homes that wanted to make a lot of changes in the environment, tear down trees, do these big additions, expand the impervious surface area. Then you had the stalwarts who created these districts. They're like, no, we want to keep things like they are, no change, no nothing. So we had a lot of interesting conversations, a lot of heated meetings. We had to call the police to a few of our meetings.
Wow.
I'm not kidding at all. So I'm like, what did I walk myself into here? But I think the one thing I learned the most from doing this project was to get your quote unquote enemies, which are not enemies really, but that's just a broad term, and get them on your side. Because I think one thing that happened is people see government as, one, you work for me, but also we don't trust you. So it's both that we always got all the time. So the one thing I had to do was build trust, right? Number one, and transparency. So with that, I said, well, one thing I can do is actually help recreate our design guidelines to make them more understandable and clear and concise for people. I think Montfort's is great. I think Joe Limestall did a great job. We all kind of know her around the preservation world. I think one thing that we had to do was talk about things like energy conservation. How do you, make a more efficient structure for yourselves, and the economics of it, and the benefits, the pros and cons. And I think once you break down that conversation to where people can understand it, then you start to coalesce around an idea. And the idea is that let's be more understanding about where folks are coming from. So we got people together, had lots of meetings. I can't tell how many meetings we had. We created these workshops for people. We brought in experts from different parts of the state to talk about, restoration of windows and talk about different things. And that helped us kind of to take the burden off of staff so much, because we were a staff of 2 people, and just kind of help build a broader coalition around that. So I think, and all these guidelines are much more visual than what they used to be. It was much more wordy and just kind of help people visualize what we're talking about. We can get kind of mired down in acronyms, planner speak, technical terms. So the other thing was like not talking above people, but talking with people and getting them to understand, or getting us to understand what they're concerned about. In terms of tree canopy, depending on the neighborhood we're working in, we have 6 districts. Well, we have 6 districts when I took over. We have 8 now. And depending on the neighborhood, they all had different issues. Some had trees, that's their issue. Some had windows, some had something else. So we had to kind of figure out how do we kind of address all these different issues in one big group of people. And we just had to break it down. And that's why we hired a consultant to kind of be a third party, so that we would not be on the target block, to kind of be that, well, staff, you're being paid by somebody else to do this. Like, no, we had a third party. And it came up with some great guidelines, very visual. They added things like we all have in the Montfort guidelines about the benefits of restoring windows, the benefits of having a tree canopy. But in terms of the solar conversation, I know this is going to come up in a little bit. There's that conflict of, well, where I want to put my panels is not the place where I get the optimal sunlight on my building. We don't have the issue as much maybe as here, but I think the challenge is our tree canopy is being decimated right now in Charlotte. We're losing like 3 football fields a day that came from our urban forester. I just heard that like last week. I'm like, really? That's in the county, not just in the city. There's a lot of green space out there, but I'm like, well, you know what? You're probably right. 'Cause I see all the permits coming in, and it's every day. It's dozens that are happening, commercial, residential, subdivisions, all that. So I think one thing that we learned is that these districts that we have are very valuable. But how do we protect the character? Number one, what are the goals that you have for preservation? There's got to be a balance between the stalwarts who are going to be, hard set in their views about preservation. We're not Williamsburg. We're not Charleston by any means. We're Charlotte. Charlotte is always changing. Have cranes in the air every day. We're not going to stop doing that, but how do you adapt change in an old neighborhood and allow new ideas to come about? That was our biggest challenge, really. And the other issue that Susan and I talked about was equity. And equity is a big word. So we're talking about access to things like affordable housing and access to green space and access to transportation choices. All those things are really ideally where we have our districts because they're all within that 3-mile circumference of our downtown area. And they have the most stuff that you can pick from. But people get priced out. That's happening. So how can we partner to make this kind of level of playing field so people can have a choice? If you can't afford to buy a house in the next town over, if you don't have a car, but you want to put your jobs in the city, how can we allow you to live there as a resident, either renting or buying? That's kind of where we landed with all of this. I could talk for days about this whole planning process of this, but that's kind of my planning lens and how we kind of handle that situation. And the good thing about it is we also got a new commission. We kind of got rid of people that weren't really being beneficial to the process and got the folks who are really kind of adamant saying, you got to do your job. I said, well, why don't you join us on the board and help us fight the good fight? And that really helped out for us. It's getting those people who were like saying, you guys are bad, you're wrong. It's like, come help us make it right.
Yes.
And that built the most bridges for us. Yeah, so that's kind of where we are and still making progress. So.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. I have the daunting task of presenting a class on urban forest, an upper division class on urban forest ecology as it relates to sustainability in just 5 minutes. But I've reduced it down to 3 words, and that is trees are good. Any questions? Thank you very much. As many of you know, trees provide us a multitude of benefits that many of us tend to take for granted. In the context of this conversation, water, energy, and carbon sequestration. And those are some of the big 3 in terms of future sustainability in climate. And this all happens at various scales. So I'm glad that Steve started his introduction with green infrastructure, which is really the landscape scale. That's from the mountains to your backyard. And then the smallest scale is site specific, and that is your backyard. And trees do some really hard work for us with all those multiple benefits, in addition to climate, water, air quality, but a really important role with pollinators. And I'm learning more and more about this, particularly our oak trees. There's that importance. So their function is measurable and it's important at different scales. When it comes to energy and at the site-specific scale, for example, trees do evapotranspiration. They're transpiring water out of their leaves. It makes your backyard a little bit cooler, and they provide shade and they sequester carbon. That helps reduce your energy bill. And there's a lot of people I've talked to over my career that have had to upgrade their HVAC system because they lost that tree shading their house. So I know this is a fact without having to go through all types of scientific proof. At the landscape scale, or let's say at the community scale, trees play an important role in reducing that urban heat island effect that Steve was talking about. And we saw here in Asheville with the urban tree canopy analysis, and the NASA team that helped us do the heat island mapping, that there's great differentials in this town between some neighborhoods and other neighborhoods. The big difference is tree canopy, and the temperature differential is from 7 to 20 degrees. And that has a direct impact on people's health and survival today, right now. So I'm really proud that Asheville Greenworks is embarking on a project this summer with NOAA to do some heat island mapping for us to do some targeted tree planting to address this climate issue right in our own backyard. So it's a really important thing for us to focus on. Part of my assignment was to give you a list of 3 or 4 things that we can do to optimize the benefits of trees and to help reconcile our conflicts between trees and infrastructure. And I want to jump into that right away so I can spend a little bit more time. I did want to say one thing about stormwater too. With our urban tree canopy study here in Asheville, over a 10-year period between 2008 and 2018, we've lost the capacity to manage stormwater, releasing more than 18 million gallons of water into our drainage system over a 10-year period. I'm not an engineer, and I could go and research what it costs to manage 18 million gallons of stormwater runoff. But as we keep losing this football field after football field of urban tree canopy, I think in our town, one of the biggest issues that we're going to face besides heat island is stormwater issues, climate change, and directly as a result of the loss of urban tree canopy. So this is a call to action. That's not something that we could really waste our time paying attention to. We've got to get more trees in the ground and take care of what we have. So here's how we do it.
2 minutes.
2 minutes? I talked that long already.
You were.
Keep me rolling. Okay, I'll talk really fast. Number 1, we can no longer take our trees for granted. That sounds like a really simple thing. Trees grow and they take care of themselves. But basically, we have to think of a better way to divide the orange. We look at our trees, we have to think about how we take better care of them. So that's number 2. And that's applying state of the science, best management practices, and standards to the care of your trees. Just don't hire anybody with a chainsaw and a pickup truck. You walk out in your backyard, think about what it takes to take care of your trees the right way. And the science and the standards are there, pay attention to it. And that applies to the city of Asheville too. We're trying to get the city to think the same way, apply the state-of-the-art best management practices. We're doing some good work in that direction. Number 3, we must require a strong commitment on the part of our elected officials to support policy that protects and enhances our urban forest. Critically important. We've made a few advances over the last couple of years. There's a lot more we have to do, which brings us to number 4. And that's that we have to develop and implement a multi-scale, comprehensive urban forest master plan that affects all ownerships in the city of Asheville, but particularly trees under public ownership. Something we've been trying to get the city to do for the last 5, 6, 7 years. They're going through a budget process now, and the request is there again. So that combined with local policymakers making a strong commitment to our urban forests, I think will really get us to a special place like no other city in the state of North Carolina. And then the last thing is that we have to end this silly little game of paper, scissors, stone when it comes to our trees. In other words, we have to lose status quo. It's always so easy for us to sacrifice our trees when we get to these infrastructure conflicts. Sidewalks heaving, let's get rid of the tree. Instead of, let's go around the tree with the sidewalk. I mean, there are solutions that we should pause and employ those solutions. Diligent ongoing maintenance and management, and creativity to resolve conflicts. Just means pausing, recognizing that tree is important, and being creative because of the collective good it provides us.
Hey, I'm Dave. I speak for the trees. The trees have no tongue. So, we started this work almost 30 years ago here in this region, trying to create a sustainable future for this community using renewable energy. And so when you get into this notion of, I want to go solar, it could be a tree that's in your way. It could be a code, right? A building code that's in your way. I mean, we've been dealing with this for a long time. The state has code, has laws that prevent any future communities from building in codes that will prevent solar from coming onto your communities. But that doesn't necessarily solve the problem that we have. Okay, so when it comes to solar, the thing that we have going on is that we might have a tree, we might have a building code, who knows what that is potentially, but ultimately it's going to be a function of, can you functionally put this system in your house, like it on a personal level, right? So it's like, it could be a tree. Well, as a community, we have ways of actually addressing this that we don't have access to right now. So the three things that I would say personally that we can do functionally is get involved with your current legislature. Because everything that you do in solar right now comes down to interacting with the utility, Duke Energy. Okay, so Duke Energy right now is imposing some new restrictions on interconnecting with the grid. We did our best to hold it back a little bit, but I'm telling you, if you want to change the paradigm in Montford, where you got all this tree cover and you can't put solar on your home, there are ways to do it. We just can't do it in the current utility climate that we have. So the first thing to do is become active with your legislature and actually let them know that solar is important to you and you want to see change happen. Because right now, you're not going to have much of an opportunity. So what are those opportunities? So there are many areas in the country where you have what's called, it's you've heard of net metering. First of all, who's got solar in their house?
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that's so awesome. Who wants solar in their house? Okay, so the question is what is in the way between you wanting solar and getting solar?
My neighbor's house.
What's that?
My neighbor's house.
Who's got trees in the way? Do people have trees? So, right, so we want to take care of the trees.
Who has money in the way?
Who's got money in the way? All right, so I mean, the reality is there are ways that we can organize ourselves so that, for instance, you could have a system somewhere else that you've invested in
Yes.
and then get credit for it on your home. Well, that's not allowed in North Carolina right now.
Yeah.
What's that?
No community solar.
Yeah.
Well, there is community solar.
Let's not get down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I
Go on that
know.
one.
Where it's a little bit of like a mirage out there
That's
for
right.
community solar. So, I mean, the bottom line is you know, we realize how difficult it's been, like from 1995 when we started. You know, my home was the first net metered home in the state of North Carolina. Like we negotiated the first agreement in North Carolina. But, you know, it's been a battle the whole way down the line because you have a utility that like doesn't want you to produce your own energy, really. So you just have to realize what you're dealing with here, right? There are ways to do it, and the only way to really affect change in this realm of solar is through the legislature. I mean, I meet every Monday morning with Duke, and it's like meeting with a bully. You know, so
Boulder on.
yeah, it's really, really tough. You know, they're.
Colorado tried to pull out.
That's right. So, I mean, these folks are, you know, they just want to make money. That's all they want to do. And we created them. Like, that's what we did. We gave them a monopoly. If we want to change it, then we have to collectively change the game. And, you know, I can't give you the answers. I can just say, like, if you've got a problem, direct it that direction, like direct it toward your representatives, because that's the only way we're going to change this thing. It's the only way it's going to happen. And then, you know, we can talk about economics and stuff like that, but I'm not going to, you know, go down that rabbit hole with you here now. I just want you to know that from a place of somebody who's wanted to change the paradigm for 30 years, the only thing we can do functionally in like Montford is we're going to have to change the laws. We're going to have to let the legislator know, like, we want solar, we want to be sustainable, and this is the way we can do it. And that's the way it's going to happen, because otherwise you're going to be cutting down the trees or, you know, making the front of your house something that you don't want to see. I mean, who knows, you know, what's going to happen when we get into that place where, you know, the ecology of the earth starts to like tell us like we can't do it anymore. We may be cutting down the trees. I mean, I don't know. I just think it's really important that we all realize there are choices to make when it comes to balancing these things, like, you know, you were talking about, Maggie. It's a tough go. So talk to your legislators. Number one.
Yeah, I can't see through you.
I'm Jimmy Wine, and I don't like going to the dentist, but I go anyway. Anybody else? A lot of this stuff is like that, where we have to set our intention to do it. We have to schedule it ahead of time. We have to plan it out, or it ain't gonna happen. So I work with Greenbelt Alliance. We host the Blue Horizons project, which is a plan for the community to get to 100% renewable energy by 2042. And that is a very tall order because we have land that is not flat. It's very expensive, and we decided we're not putting wind up because our hills are too beautiful. So how do we get all that renewable energy with all of these constraints? And the Blue Horizons project is a community committee that's working on getting there together, going to the dentist together, deciding. The dentist thing is going through the whole thing. So come go there with me. Buckle up. We're going all in on the dentist metaphor. So Blue Horizons project has decided as a community council after about 4 years that there are 3 ways we're going to do this. One is greening the grid. Okay, so we need Duke Energy to be involved, which my esteemed colleague just told me that's going to be tough. We got to electrify everything, and that is difficult in some ways and easy in others. But if we're burning fossil fuels in our homes, we'll never go carbon free. And I cook at my house. I love my stove. But I'll tell you what, an induction stove offers the same service with no fossil fuel. So looking for those kinds of technological trade-offs so we can get the same services are really important for that one. Heat pumps are also a really big piece on that. And then embracing efficiency. So the energy we don't use is energy we don't have to produce. So the committee has come together with City of Asheville, Buncombe County, and Duke Energy sitting at the table, talking this out, trying to find places where we agree versus places that we disagree. So solar seems very popular in the room. I don't speak to many rooms where it's that popular, but it is actually at the top of this whole pyramid of action. And the easiest stuff we should be doing first at the bottom, working our way up to the top. Because if you're not using the energy, you can get a smaller solar system and it's cheaper. You can get to net zero even possibly if you do this other stuff first. And there are programs to help you get there. In your house, you probably already know this is a pretty green crowd. Your HVAC system is using a lot of your energy. So a lot of focus on the stuff that I'm going to tell you tonight that you should start doing, like going to the dentist regularly, is taking care of that conditioned air, keeping that expensive air inside and that cheap air outside. Never the two shall meet. Mostly, you still got to breathe, right? So there's some leeway there. But there's some ways to save energy that are conservation, and that's not using the energy by changing your behavior. And then there's ways to use energy, but use it better. So that's efficiency. So we've been talking about light bulbs forever. I'm so glad that CFLs aren't around anymore. I've been an environmentalist for my whole life, and it was hard to hawk those things. But these LEDs are great. No mercury, you don't have to dispose of them properly. They're not fuzzy. Sorry, I'll stop soapboxing about CFLs. Not a fan. So by doing these things, we can help save energy. We can embrace efficiency like we're planning on doing to get to 100% renewable energy. Individually, that stuff is really important. But I want to take a moment to get out of the dentist chair and into the therapist chair. And I want you to think in your mind, when you're thinking about energy efficiency, about the environment, and why you're in this room now, what are the words that come to mind? What values you have? You can even yell out a couple if you're feeling so inspired.
Save the planet.
Save the planet. What else? Why are you here?
Be able to breathe.
Being able to breathe. What else?
Sustainability.
Sustainability, nature, these values of caring for the earth. Think about people that aren't in the room and what words do they use? And think about expanding your perspective about what sustainability means. It might mean job security. It might mean workforce training. It might mean having to get a new job. And think about how we bring everybody onto this boat, because it's got to be a big boat if we're going to keep going. I'll move away from the dentist. I don't know how. This is one project that the group has kind of worked through, and now the county is pushing on by doing a study on floating photovoltaics, which are really cool. So I thought I'd put it on a slide and talk about it. They're happening all over the world. They're a little more expensive, but because they're over the water, it cools them off. So you get more production out of them to offset the extra cost. And also, if you want to drink the water, it reduces evaporation. So you actually save more water from evaporation. So that's a neat solution, that technology that can help us get there. It won't get us all the way there, but it could get us part of the way there. So what are things that you can do at your house? I was asked, okay, what can you do individually? What can you advocate for locally? And what can you advocate state, national? So you can get money, cash money in your pocket or as a rebate from Duke Energy to do a lot of this work at your house. Now, if you're in the co-op, not so much. But if you got Duke, then this is the way to go, because they'll give you money to buy a new HVAC compressor if you need a new heat pump. They'll give you money to swap out appliances. They'll give you money for installation. And so you should go online and check this out. I can send this out afterwards. The links are in the presentation. But it's Energy Wise Home and Energy Saver are the two Duke programs for this. You can do it yourself. I've done a lot of this stuff myself. A lot of it I will never do myself again. There are contractors that will also come and do it for you. And then as far as low-income households, if you want to come volunteer, we have a program where volunteers go in and help low-income households save energy on their bills with easy upgrades. It's called Energy Savers Network. So that's one way you can participate. And then change how you operate your home. Adjust your thermostat. Get it a little closer to the outside temperature, and you'll save yourself some money. So the Inflation Reduction Act, I have never seen so many environmentalists stand in a room and say, it's great, but we don't know what it does. It does something. And so we're slowly working that out. But we put together this product, this flyer. It's freewiringamerica.org and it's on our website. And it goes through all these different things you can get from the Inflation Reduction Act. It's like a checking account for you individually to make improvements at your house, in your life, with your vehicle to try to get carbon free. So this is from the federal government. The one before that was from the utility. And let's see, that's all right, so
solar.
the solar incentive,
Yeah,
is it on there?
no.
30%.
30%.
I'm surprised it's not on there. Someone's got to enter that slide. So they reinstituted the solar incentive that was going away. So that's really exciting because over 10 more years, we're supposed to get a 30% tax rebate. Okay, so back in the therapy chair. Think about those other words and the people that are using those words. To me, that's equity. If they care about the environment because of their job, or because they're trying to build wealth, or because they want to be comfortable in their own home, how do we get those people in the room, this room, talking about this topic so that together we can decide on how to shape our future? That we're missing some voices. That's not to say that the voices that are here and care are important. That's to say that Blue Horizons Project is about expanding the tent and bringing everybody on board so that, you know, they don't get to skip that dentist chair.
That was fast. Okay, are we still awake? Really? I have basically the same slide that Jamie had, but it's like way easier. Okay, I'm the like final sweep. So trees are good. Old trees of multiple species are better, right?
Yeah.
So we want to keep those old trees. We don't want those new little spindly ones that no one maintains. Okay, I'm talking about all this stuff. Sustainability is everything. So scales of influence, right? You need to figure out what's your scale of influence. You have your home, your property. You have all your decisions, your daily decisions, your weekly, your life decisions. We're also thinking about intergenerational ethics, right? So when you're thinking of your words, maybe you're thinking like grandchildren or future generations, or hopefully you are. So what do we want Asheville to look like in 50 years or 200 years, right? We want to be as beautiful and cool and green as it is today. Have you driven to the airport recently?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Have you driven on New Leicester Highway recently? Yeah, clear cuts everywhere. So first of all, we can improve our tree ordinance, but I won't get into that. Okay, so we're going to think about what we want Asheville to look like. So also, how are we going to increase our climate resilience? And so resilience means our ability to withstand disasters, right? So we know we'll have strong winds, right? How many trees fell down? Now, the answer to that, when those trees fell down, was not to like cut more trees down, because what if they're dangerous? Keep the trees, right? But we have to be ready for extreme winds and flooding, right? The message of all this is flooding is coming. We need to be ready, and we can use green infrastructure to be ready. We have to have less impervious surfaces, right? So we can't be paving everything. It'd be really great if we created some constructed wetlands, and have some stream buffers, river buffers. Okay, so we're going to be ready for these extreme events, both habitat wise and also with solar, and maybe with some battery backup. So what can you do at home? All these things that you just mentioned, which are all fabulous. We're going to start by using less energy, right? So instead of just like getting solar and feeling good, we're going to first use less energy. Then we're going to switch over to our, get good insulation, have our Energy Star appliances, and then we're going to use our renewables. And offset is the last resort, not a fan. Okay, at home, what does your yard look like? Hopefully no lawn. It's going to be really anti-lawn. And shout out to Phyllis, B-City. So you're gonna get help from the Native Plant Society or the Greenworks Pollinator Certification Program and figure out how you're gonna slowly shift your whole yard to native plants, or maybe permaculture. Throw some food there too. Okay, think about our quality of life. So we don't want to have extreme urban heat island effect. We don't want our temperature to be rising. I don't think we do in Asheville, be hotter. We know that's unevenly distributed throughout the city. I will say UNC Asheville has a thing called the McCullough Fellows Program, and one of our McCullough Fellows this coming summer is also working with Greenworks and NOAA on the urban heat island study. So in July, they'll be walking around the city with a thermometer, seeing how the different neighborhoods differ in temperature, and then correlating that with canopy cover. And then in November, there'll be another Greenworks Urban Forest Symposium. So get ready for that. You can hear all the results of that. So we need to protect our old trees and our urban canopy, because it's really, we really can't replace them. Once they're gone, we paved it. It's really hard to turn back. Okay, and I was going to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. So just to like amplify that, we have our city goal of 100% renewable for city buildings by 2030, really soon. We have our county goal of 100% renewable in the county, all over the county by 2042. Very ambitious. And we should all, if we're able to, use the Inflation Reduction Act benefits to sort of jumpstart some of that energy efficiency. With any of those things that were listed. So if you want to hear more about sustainability at UNC Asheville, which is not the point of this talk, I'm giving a talk for Ollie, a STEM talk on April 27th. It'll be on Zoom. You can just look up Ollie at UNCA. You'll see it. April 27th at 4:30. What else did I want to say? All right. So basically the message is think about future generations and think about your personal actions and get active. Yeah. All right.
Thank you, everybody, our lovely speakers. We're gonna do some Q&A now. And I think some people were extra excited, and so we're gonna start. You mentioned Lynn, but I don't see her here. Did you want to? Oh my gosh, you're right there. Yeah, so come on, do it.
Come up with a question.
You don't have a question. Do your question. That's not a
No,
question.
it's not a question. I know the answer to it.
You're allowed to make a comment as well as a question.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Well, I have solar panels and I get the reading on my Solar Edge app, which shows me the equivalency of trees that I have planted according to the amount of kilowatt hours I produce on my roof. But I just find that really hard to grasp because that's not apples and apples. And when people read that, in my case, it's 56 trees I've planted, so to speak, in the past year that I've had these solar panels. But the trees do not do all those things, or the panels do not do all those things that trees do. That all of you have spoken very eloquently to, the providing the habitat for wildlife and promoting biodiversity and mitigating stormwater and providing shade and all transpiration, all that stuff. So I find that just very deceptive. And so, Dave,
You're the man.
the best. How can we do that? I know the EPA has come up with that formula that has created that some years ago.
Yeah, no, that's really the marketers of the inverter manufacturer, right? So, I mean, they're like trying to give everyone, what litmus test do you have for the investment? So one of the things that I think is really important for everyone to realize here is like all of these things are a choice. Like that's really big for me. Like, to go solar is a choice. Like you didn't have to do that. So you're my hero. Like not because I'm in the business, but because you made a personal decision to do something that you believed in on principle and maybe some financial return, whatever. But, same thing by not going solar and leaving your trees in place or whatever that is, it's a choice that we have to make. It's a free choice. And so, in this industry, we're, because we're an option, you can just keep plugging in Duke, right? You just go ahead. It's like, $20 or $100 a month, just plug in, like, why should I go solar? People are looking for some understanding about what that means on a bigger level.
But
Right.
it really doesn't mean the equivalency of.
It's from a CO2 per, it's just simply CO2.
Exactly, but I think it's misleading and that concerns.
I think that you should call up Solar Edge. Know what's going on, because, I mean, I agree with you, like, I didn't go solar, 30 years ago for those reasons. So, some of this is just marketing, right? So giving people an understanding like, well, I made this choice, I feel good about it. It's not just a financial choice. I have other reasons why I've done this. And so it's giving everyone some understanding about what that means. And maybe we could do a better job, or they could do a better job of what that means.
I think Ed wanted to respond, but before
Yeah,
that,
go ahead.
I'll just add on to that. I think the choice part that you're bringing up, I hear you on the, it feels misleading. The other thing is we make different choices for different goals at the same time. A solar panel does not solve all of our environmental challenges, nor does one tree, right? And so we need to be making that choice for ourselves and then collectively coming together and saying, as a group, as a community, where is the tension of these choices? And yeah, I think that's just some like marketing.
It's really hard to quantify, right? You can quantify carbon fairly easily.
That's the
We've gotten really good at that. So that's what they project, right? So, go ahead.
Yeah, I have an emotional response to that issue. And so I guess I'm the psychiatrist here now. But also more science-based response. The emotional response is it is marketing, and I'll explain how bad it really is, but we should never, ever forsake our trees to accommodate technology. That's what got us in this mess to start with, forsaking natural systems, to accommodate our lifestyle, and now look what we're looking at. If you were to Google trees versus solar, you get all kinds of analysis coming up saying that, trees only sequester this amount of carbon a year, but solar does, 10 times more. But they don't address the other ecosystem services that trees provide. They don't address the carbon sink that trees form underneath the ground. And they don't address the evapotranspiration and the shade effect, reducing energy consumption. And they don't address the urban heat island effect. So what it does is it reduces it to the site-specific level. It's like, okay, I have this tree and I want to have solar. And it feels good to remove that tree because I'm going to sequester 10 times more carbon. Big mistake. I think that
Agreed.
You can probably prune your tree to accommodate better solar access, as long as you understand that you're reducing the optimization of both systems, the tree and the solar system. Solar system.
I think it's a false narrative, actually, but.
I totally agree with you, and just for the record, I did not cut down any trees.
And then actually just initiated our tree replanting program in this neighborhood.
Oh, that's
So thank you, Lynn, for the tree initiative.
all right. We have a
And
question in the back with a hat.
Agree.
And remember, teammates, I'm going to help us be concise when we respond so we can talk to all of our friends.
I just want to make a comment, not to jump on Dave, but something that's not being brought up is manufacturing of the solar panels. The tree, you don't manufacture tree.
Well, that's true. A lot of these sites also don't talk about the lifetime impact or carbon footprint. Cradle to grave kind of stuff.
Right.
And there is some of that, and there is good stuff, information on the web. So I mean, these days you have to be a smart consumer.
And it's pitting us to make a choice. In the beginning, we talked about both
Right.
and. We're already having an either or conversation right off the bat because it's so easy, because it feels like that's the only choice we have. And I dare us, it is not the only choice. And we have to be a smart consumer, and we have to figure where the give and take is. And we have to figure out what our choice is, because it might not be uniform at every residence. Dave Nutter, welcome.
Thank you, Maggie. My question is, wouldn't it
perhaps be a good idea for this group to come together again and sit down and analyze all of the various competitive conflicts and contradictions between your various points of view in order that we can have it all on the table at the same time and begin to forge a very courageous compromise of cooperation within these forces. I'd just like to mention that I served in the army in Germany 60 years ago, and I noticed even then, and I think I've noticed ever since then, that the Germans do seem to have a very interesting and different approach to the environment in that they don't see it as a conflict or a war between the economy and the environment, but they built a system that corroborates between those two forces. Just a thought.
I will second that.
There you go. Other question? Yeah.
So I wanted to make two comments. The first one is, it would be nice to see the city when for new building have like prioritize, first save the big trees if that's not possible, do this and this to kind of improve the sustainability of our city. And the other thing is getting to date. I've written letters to the legislators. Is there something we can do directly to force them to do some things? Because, I mean, I think I bought a share of Duke supposedly so I could have some shareholders power, which I don't think it's done any good. But is there anything like that? Because I honestly, I mean, as many letters as I write to the legislators, I get just form letter back that just blows me up. So is there any other way to do this?
I'll jump in really quick with saying that former city councilwoman Julie Mayfield is now our state senator. She spearheaded the initiative to put Duke's feet to the fire. Duke now has a carbon plan that is saying that they will go carbon neutral by 2050. These policies are ambitious. You mentioned that too, Allison, and it's better than nothing, right? So we are seeing progress. Is it fast enough? No. Have we solved it? Not yet. So I do want to say it is working. We are getting the right people there. And there's a lot.
You can pull a boulder though on
We can-
Boulder, Colorado.
we can
Threatened
look at
Excel.
municipalization.
Out of the system.
Well,
and
we
forced Excel to the
talked,
table.
we talked about that like 5 years ago. About Asheville, like being our own utility.
Yeah, that's being talked about is right now the city. The idea is for the city to become its own municipal utility, not where the city would produce its own power, but the city would basically, like the city government would say, you don't have the authority to come into our right of way. And so we're gonna do this. So your power stops at our right of way, then the city would sell power to you like we.
Which gives us some
It's a
autonomy.
possibility, and then you can buy renewable energy.
Tension.
Well, I agree with you.
Excel came to the table and said, we'll do what you want.
So that's a local thing. Like, I agree with you. We could get on Esther and Maggie and have them, put pressure on, the local government to make that initiative. It's a heavy lift, just so you know, it's a really heavy lift, but that is one option, right? So, I mean, the bottom line is like, we are controlled in a monopoly state, right? So the only way to affect it is either with the Utilities Commission or through legislation, which we've done both, right? So we created the rebate program. Who participated in the rebate program? All right, you're welcome.
Solarized.
We made that happen, right? So, but the times are changing a little bit, and the tides go like this a little bit. So, I agree with you. There are options before us, but we need the political will. Like Maggie needs the political will to go to the mat, because to be our own utility is a really heavy lift. I mean, it's. Waynesville is its own. So Waynesville is its own utility, but it's been so for like what, 120 years or something?
I think what I'm hearing is, I hear a really bold idea, where we would just kind of say, all right, Duke, no, you can't have access to us. We're opting out. And by that, we want renewable. Is it easy? No. Is it worth having on the table because we are not going to reach these goals? Yeah. And we need to put all those things on the table.
Right?
Thanks for bringing it up.
No question.
Question?
I had a question and a comment. One, there is a book, Climate Courage by, you know that book?
No, I don't.
Andreas Corellis, and he talks about one town in Texas that has completely, they have control. It was not just done by tree huggers. It was done by Debbie Dooley, who is a Tea Party person, because it is financially feasible. And that's part of what has to be pointed out as well. So there's the end of what. The other point I want to make, question and point, is talking about equity. Besides individuals buying solar for their home, if that's out of the range of your possibility, could we not think of a way of pooling money for people who can't afford that? I mean, that is what I would be much more interested, rather than spending thousands of dollars of putting a solar panel on my roof. How about putting like a crowdfunding so that somebody who doesn't have trees around them, it makes it hard to even get cooling, give them solar power. And then it goes on generation to generation. How can we think about that as a community here in Asheville?
Great idea. Yeah.
Do you wanna answer that or? Yeah, okay, so,
Yes,
so
should do that.
that's a
Put it on
great
the
idea,
table.
right? So
Yeah.
crowdfunding, true community solar is definitely one really great avenue, especially for a community like Montfort, right? It's like, well, I can't put it on here. Well, there are certain things, like I said, like, this idea of, virtual net metering, right? Where I could put solar out in a field somewhere and I would get credit on my meter. Those things have to be approved by the Utilities Commission. And you're dealing with a monopoly that essentially will do everything in its power to stop it, okay? So those things are available to us, but when I say, we have to put pressure on the utility, through the legislature, they're not gonna do it on their own. They're not, they just.
Well, maybe they won't do it on, but Julie Mayfield got to put that coal burning power out with Green Alliance. Had a lot, you all had a lot to do with getting that stopped. It can be done.
And I think that the spirit of what I hear you saying is, not all of us have a wherewithal to be able to, not all of us own our roofs, right? So there's a lot of people who need the benefit of the light staying on when the power goes out, when we have disasters, right? And so how can those with opportunity and privilege contribute? Where Dave is coming is the really real technical barriers to the types of programs we see in other communities that really take off to make it easy. And we also have a community collaborative that Jamie leads right now, where we can all play into that community coalition to create programs that work like that. We could do a GoFundMe right now, find a partner with MHO, Mountain Housing Opportunity, who is building new affordable units, and fund their solar. So we can get to that spirit. The utility makes it trickier than in other states, but we can still move towards those things. And I appreciate knowing the technical elements of it as well. Ooh, I'm seeing a question from the ether. Welcome. And if you want to unmute for us, you could ask your question.
Sure. And thank you for all being there. And I'm just right around the corner, as Phil and Lynn know, and thank you for all the work that you do. I think we, of course, need trees and we need solar. I just bought a new EV. I've got an EV charger out there that do basically cover the cost of. But we also need the ability here in Montfort to have solar panels that are visible on our roofs. I have a tree canopy behind my house. I need solar on the front. but that's not permissible currently, as far as I know. And so I think in our historic districts, that's another thing to think about. How do we incorporate that kind of technology into what's permissible? And that's all I wanted to really to say, but thank you for organizing this discussion this evening.
You know what's in Montfort that's not historic, that's all over Montfort? Automobiles. But we all have them. They're everywhere. So we make trade-offs all the time, and historic district trade-offs are really difficult. Before I was
Right,
here,
so-
I was in New Orleans. Same problem. So this is not just our problem. The problem is worldwide. Like, how do we balance these priorities? How do we get to Maggie's yes and?
I'm trying to look something up. I apologize via my phone, but our historic resources staff who tonight is the Historic Resource Commission evening, which I skipped as the liaison to be here. So otherwise our historic staff would be here, but I think John might be able to share a little bit of some of that tension there. The other thing is that we have had 18 requests for solar on the front in Montfort, no, in a historic district in in Asheville, which is more than just Montfort, and all of them but 2 have been approved and the 2 were withdrawn. So we have a conception, a story, and it doesn't happen, and that's not bearing out in the data right now. I just wanted to add that. Staff would want to make sure we got to share that. Did you want to speak to this at all? I don't want to put you on the spot, but it seems like you wrestled with some of that and came up with some of the guidelines.
Yeah, one of the preservation 101 things is no panels on the front or in the public realm. So you got a corner lot, you put them on the side, that's the public realm. And the whole thing is about context. So if you become a district, you want to keep the historic context of the streetscape, the tree canopy, and all that. That's why people move and become a district, so to protect those things. Not that we're against solar, because we're not. Y'all get way more than we do. We're not even on your level at all. But when people do come and ask, it's an automatic, never mind, because they know that our commission will say no, and the neighbors will say no to the front. So it's a whole different mindset. So you guys are at a different place than we are, but we've approved some, but they're either in the back or you can't see them from the street. And that's the whole preservation kind of, ethos. You don't want to have panels on the front or in public. That's a whole other thing for y'all to wrestle with.
Well, and I think your point is good, is that the way these decisions are made in Asheville is through a city council appointed citizen commission at the Historic Resources Commission. And so to the caller's point, I think that there is the academic ethos around historic preservation, and there's a both and conversation in Asheville of, I understand the academic ethos for historic preservation, but there's also been flexibility so that multiple goals could live at the same time in our very neighborhood. Question in the back?
Yeah, given the sense of urgency that was discussed in the very beginning and the time being now, I wonder if y'all could have any examples or advice for NGOs and individuals. That seems like engaging local government and local government agencies are going to be imperative in order to solve this problem at the scale in which it's needed. I wondered if y'all could speak to successes for engaging and partnering with government agencies and government, and perhaps the gentleman from Charlotte could share what he likes from NGOs and citizens reaching out to him that has been successful.
Oh boy, success.
Do John and then Allison.
Yeah, not a whole lot from us in terms of solar.
It's not just solar, I mean, across the board. I mean, solar is getting a lot of the love, and so is the green canopy, but all these issues are require us.
Something the heart you're getting at is that, or am I picking up what you're putting down? There's power in local government and government agencies in general. And those who are in those roles take it really seriously and make sure we don't wield it poorly. And there's a lot of people here who are doing really good work, want to be engaged, a lot of folks that work with nonprofits. And so whether it's solar or whether it's sustainability or urban tree canopy, where is there effective collaboration? Where have you seen really good teamwork happen? Whether it's on updating a design guide or creating a community coalition. Am I in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
So is anyone? I want to make sure all of our teammate panelists can speak. I know Allison wanted to chat to that.
I would be happy to give a great example. So shout out to the county, Buncombe County, Jeremiah Leroy, who's the sustainability coordinator, was the only one for a while there at the county. Because the county has a 2040 goal of 100% renewable, they have some bond money to kind of push that forward. And so they partnered with UNC Asheville to do a solar feasibility study, and they identified 3 buildings on our campus that were the most feasible for solar. And that saved us a lot of money for those initial engineering drawings. And they're doing it all across the county with like the Woodfin Fire Department, certain libraries, schools. So they're starting with public access buildings. And so that got us to then fund, again, shout out to Ollie, because we ended up putting it on the Reuters Center, which is an Ollie building that had the best orientation and roof type. So yeah, those creative partnerships are great. And then I'll just give another sustainability shout out on a totally different topic, but food waste, right, y'all? Food waste. What is going on
in Asheville?
It is.
Declared it on
Just had the
Tuesday.
resolution. And there's a great group called WNC Food Waste Solutions. We have a newsletter, lots of cool events, and there's going to be a food waste solutions summit meeting in November at AV Tech. So that's something else you can do in your personal life. Don't waste food.
I'll also chime in, and I know Dave, you wanted to speak to this also. We have boards and commissions at both the city and the county level. The city has a lot more than the county, so there's a lot more routinized system-based ways to get involved. There's a lot of community members right now who are doing a deep dive on how to make those more effective and more directly connected to policy making as well as policy advising. So boards and commissions are a place. I'd love to talk to anyone curious. We have them in historic resources. We have them in sustainability. We have them in urban forestry. We have them in multimodal transportation. So that's just a couple.
And renewable energy.
Great ways. In the sustainability, the renewable energy stuff gets handled in the Sustainability Advisory Committee. So there's a lot of different ways there to be involved as well. Dave, did you want to speak to that partnership?
Yeah, I just, so the city and the county has had a long history of engagement on these issues. And, the first time was when Duke wanted to put the peaker plant in Woodfin, right? And so we pulled together and we met like every week
In this room.
in this room.
Yeah, thought it.
It was called SEAC at the time, the Citizens Energy Advisory Council. And so, we met with them every week and we like tried to, or maybe it was every month. But then when the next thing came, we had the Energy Innovation Task Force. And so when we conceived of this idea, we made sure that the city and the county and Duke were equally involved in the process of trying to avoid building this other peaker plant. And we were successful. And the Blue Horizons project is really the result of that work that we did. I think it laid into and gave the groundwork for, the community's commitment to being sustainable by 2042. So, we're working on it, but every step of the way you get to these places where it's like, a little bit of a, we're gonna have to push it over the top now. And I think the best way is really through the legislature at this point, actually, and with local governance.
Lots of options. You have a comment?
I just want to speak to public-private partnership. It's not here, it's in Washington, DC, but it's something I know about because we created it 13 years ago. It's something that could be replicated down here. We learned the WGL, the gas utility, see nothing, it doesn't always have to be oppositional with the utility. Work with your utility. There's ways to work with them. We learned that they wanted to sell carbon offsets to their customers that were green oriented as part of their green program. So we worked with them and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, major non-NGO in the mid-Atlantic area. We would sell carbon offsets, reinvest the portions of the carbon offsets into a carbon reduction fund that the Chesapeake Bay Foundation managed. They turn around and use that money to plant trees all over Chesapeake Bay watershed area that to this date, 13 years later, have raised several $1 million. They planted tens of thousands of trees. But more importantly, I've been able to go to universities whose students want to be engaged because every other weekend or so they have a tree planting event wherever, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, wherever the Chesapeake Bay watershed goes. And then they go to the university and say, buy our carbon offsets. And we'll turn around and plant trees in your campus, your grounds. Those are the kinds of things that all funded by a utility looking to sell carbon offsets because they're offering a green product to their customers. That could be something that's replicated down here.
That both and it's finding the partnership, but also makes me think in the both and thinking a lot of what I've heard from our leaders tonight is a baby tree and an old tree have really different turnout and value and benefit and beauty. And so like that type of program, but that goes into preserving and protecting and stewarding, maintaining existing trees. Now we're moving in the right direction. Yeah, we are getting to the point where we're gonna start to close questions and move into just let's hang out until 9, then we all have to be out of here and the lights are out. So let's maybe do 2 or 3 more. Oh my gosh, there's so many good questions. We got Ben in the back and then you can go next with the beautiful constellation dress.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Stockdale. I've heard so many awesome things today. It's so inspiring to be in this room. I volunteer on the Blue Horizons Project Community Council, and we're actively working on the 100% community goal. And I'd love to have y'all get involved. So I just want to plug for our next meeting, which is, once I pull up my calendar, it is on May 3rd from 3 to 4:30. It's open to the public so we talk about what we're doing to work on this goal, and we need help. It's very challenging to think about how we're going to get there, but I'm really optimistic. I know we can do it. And my question to the panel would be, what do you think about the local capacity for generation? And do you think that we have the ability to generate 2.5 to 3 gigawatts as the Cadmus report indicated in 2019? Do you think we have the capacity to generate that locally? And if not, what do you think the options for procurement might be elsewhere?
You want to take that one? I got some ideas, but.
I think Maggie can take that one. I'm here a little bit.
I think Ben knows what the answer is.
I know.
Yeah.
I don't think we have enough flat land in our region to do that. If you put together the available flat land, regardless if it has trees or not, and all of our
Even rooftops.
and our rooftops, we don't have enough. So we need to get real creative.
That's why just, the virtual net metering is like really important.
And
Right? If we have one thing we want to push for, it would be that,
well, there's
or one of the things. So.
really
The
excited.
key is we can cut our usage down enough by energy efficiency that we don't have to have at least that.
I'm all about
Just together. I wanted to take your question, but I also want to prime anybody. I would love to hear if anyone's burning questions around green infrastructure. We started out talking about green infrastructure and trees, and especially around solving for stormwater. Is anyone kind of marinating on a question around there? Because I really think there's more to be shared there.
Just a real quick question. I see a lot of old growth trees that get strangled by invasive vines there. I even talked to the people at UNCA about taking some of those down on some of their property. And nothing's been done. Is that a significant problem here that's it's totally ignored?
Oh, okay, well, can I just jump in? Yeah, I wouldn't say totally ignored, being working at UNCA. Not jump, I'm gonna jump. Okay, so just shout out for kudzu culture. There's a group called kudzu culture that's addressing this. We did have goats out to see if we could use goats to help with some of that property, but it can't have been herbicided within the last 5 years. In DOT, that's DOT right away, and they're herbiciding every year. So it's this, again, creative solution with the coalitions. There's other great organizations like Raven Invasive Removal. Yes, we need to remove the English ivy and all the other, there's all that stuff. Y'all can do it again, start with your own home, take off 16 inches around the tree trunks and save those old trees. So we are working on it and we would love more volunteer help.
So we're gonna do one more question and then we're gonna mill and hang out. So if you have other questions, we can chat. I know that there's more than we have time.
Oh, excuse me, can we also start chatting more out in this area?
Yes. Yeah, we will move in this direction.
No pressure.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I guess it kind of intersects a lot of these different topics around the green infrastructure and the urban forest. And I guess my question is for Mr. Howard around, when I think about Montford, because, you know, this is kind of centered around Montford, density. We talk about new development, particularly for housing and, the impermeable surfaces and the trees that go down with new development. And since 1970 or so, Montford has lost about 40% of our population density due to gentrification and fewer people being in the buildings. So just wanting to throw out that kind of food for thought. And you mentioned something about equity and affordable housing is some of your initiatives in Charlotte. I think there's an intersection with that and protecting trees and housing people without building new construction within this particular neighborhood. So, and I know that would probably involve some zoning changes, like form-based. I don't understand it all, but that was my kind of, but I wanted to hear your experience with that.
Yeah, the zoning, yeah, the last point is right, zoning changes. So recently we adopted a comprehensive plan, which made it easier to build like ADUs on properties, to build duplex quads on single family lots. So this form that you've got, traditional building form in Montford, can be replicated in our case, in different parts of the city. So if you build a new subdivision, that can happen that way. So that way you're densifying without building like a bunch of multifamily buildings, but you're kind of doing it, you know, lot by lot without building like, you know, 10-story buildings everywhere. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. So I'm gonna, I guess I want to add a 2-cent and then I'm gonna ask everybody to close with a closing question. And I think that I really love that you're bringing this. I love that we're gonna end it. I think that the different goals and priorities we bring here today, we could have a panel with 20 more seats. We could be talking about access to jobs. We could talk about transportation. We could be talking about affordable housing. And from a city council seat, not just the part that connects to the sustainability. I'm not okay staying in a city where only the most wealthy can live. I'm not okay with people who serve living further and further away, having bigger carbon footprints as they drive to provide service. If we can't house us, we have a problem. And we are seeing growth. And a lot of it's ugly. And we're also seeing the growth in the size of individual houses that takes up more of our shared space for Ashevilleans to be part of our community. So that's a whole other panel. I mean, really, maybe it is, you know, this type of thing of bringing folks together who can sometimes have challenges. We need to be having conversations. So much gratitude for that. So my closing question for the team is, what gives you hope? Who wants?
My beagle.
Okay, you're
My students, they're awesome.
okay.
So,
Your
so
beagle.
all
All
of that.
right. Anybody else?
Emerging technology.
Tell me more. Emerging technology.
We were just talking earlier about, you know, like the solar panel thing. If you have shingles that actually look like shingles on your roof, or things that could be hidden in plain sight in the preservation world, I think that's what we're trying to get at, is if you do something, make it blend in and be contextual. So emerging tech would be one of mine.
Great.
Yeah, we aren't the only city dealing with a lot of these issues. You know, every city is kind of a test case of what can happen. We're building the future Asheville right now. And good things usually happen only by some vision and intention, good planning, good design. Sometimes that goes lacking, but you know, the answers are out there. You know, if emerging technology is part of it, but we have many opportunities to shape a great city. And, you know, Asheville isn't so big that we can't change some things that have, you know, that we realize now we should have done something differently. Charlotte's pretty darn big and they have it's harder to turn it around, you know.
Good luck, John.
neighborhood, he's got a big challenge. So, but it's, here we've got coalitions that work at neighborhood level and have a direct access to our city leaders. So that's one hope.
Yeah, I think the collective human will is pretty powerful, especially when it comes to survival. And that gives me hope. I think that it's more and more discussions like this. I think technology is one of the solutions. I think we need to really see our natural systems and understand how they work and decide what's desirable and acceptable, and measure change and make change so we're moving in a positive direction. And we have the capacity to do that. So I'm forever hopeful.
I'm hopeful because of all of you. Seriously, I mean, we have come a long way, and Maggie has watched a lot of what we've been able to do in Asheville. So, I mean, I am super hopeful because we have a really special community. We're conscious people, and it's about conscious evolution. Like, we're gonna have to grapple with these things ourselves, in our own homes. And we have to grapple with them on a collective basis, on a community level, and on a state level, and on a national level. And I am just hopeful because I live in this wonderful community. So thank you all.
Are you saying we're woke?
How woke are you?
Very woke.
Okay.
Just spoke. Okay, with that, we're gonna give an extra thanks to the Susans for bringing us together. And I'm gonna ask for 5 people to raise their hands to help me put the chairs away, and I'm gonna ask everybody else to start moving out.
I want to thank Maggie for facilitating.
Thank you.
And take carbon offset.
Where do your chairs go?
I know. Right.